It was dawn on July 2, 1937, when a crackling radio transmission brought the world to a silent standstill. KHAQQ calling Alaska. We must be on you, but cannot see you. But gas is running low, came Amelia Earhart's voice over the Pacific airwaves. Minutes later, she sent one last faint clue. We are on the line 157 337. Wait, giving bearings that drew a narrow line over a tiny island and back to open ocean. Then, nothing. In an instant, the world's most celebrated female aviator vanished into thin air, leaving only mystery in her wake. Amelia Earhart had already become a household name long before that final flight. Born in 1897 in Kansas, she broke through every barrier facing women in the 1920s and 30s. Despite discouragement, even from her own family, she set record after record, winning hearts around the globe. In 1928, she was the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. In 1932, she earned the Distinguished Flying Cross as the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. By her late 30s, she was a celebrity pilot, nicknamed Lady Lindy after Charles Lindbergh, and a tireless advocate for aviation and women's progress. In her own words, she urged that women must try to do things as men have tried. When they fail, their failure must be but a challenge to others. As she once wrote to President Roosevelt, I feel that women now and then have to do things to show what women can do. Her bold spirit, summed up in a motto, the decision to act is the most difficult thing, made her an icon. Even after her disappearance, Earhart's achievements still serve as an inspiration to thousands of budding young pilots. For her most ambitious venture, Earhart chose a sleek Lockheed Electra 10E airplane, specially modified for long-distance flight. The twin-engine Electra had its passenger seats removed, extra fuel tanks added, and the latest radios and instruments. Its powerful Wasp engines and twin-tail design made it an icon of aviation history. With full fuel, it could fly roughly 4,000 to 4,500 miles non-stop, a remarkable range at that time. On June 1, 1937, Earhart and her veteran navigator Fred Noonan set off from Oakland, California on an eastbound flight around the world. Their route would take them thousands of miles across oceans and continents. Indeed, less than a month later, they reached Lae, New Guinea, after logging about 22,000 miles. From Lae, they planned one last jump, a 2,500-mile dash to tiny Howland Island, a speck of coral in the Central Pacific. All they needed was to refuel there and then head west across the Pacific. But trouble was already brewing. Thick clouds blanketed the morning sky, and Earhart's radio was acting up. As the Electra approached Howland, her last visible destination, communications became desperate. Howland Island was badly a banana-shaped green patch in the blue Pacific, only 1.6 square kilometers. An American Coast Guard cutter, Itasca, waited offshore to guide Earhart home. At 7:42 a.m. local time on July 2, she rated on the radio. We must be on you, but cannot see you. But gas is running low. Planes overhead searched the sky, but could not spot the Electra. 40 minutes later, Earhart radioed a mysterious set of bearings. We are on the line 157 337. 6210 kilocycles. Wait. Referring to compass headings that cut across Howland and another island far to the south. Then the Electra fell silent. The world watched and waited. Both ship and shore searched frantically, but could not find nothing. As Britannica records, overcast skies and low fuel meant Earhart and Noonan did not reach their destination. Despite extreme efforts, in fact, the most expensive air and sea search in American history up to that point, not a trace of Earhart or Noonan was ever found. President Roosevelt dispatched 9 Navy ships and 66 aircraft to scour the Pacific. They combed 250,000 square miles of ocean for days, with spotter planes overhead. In the end, aside from a few unrelated debris, nothing emerged. On January 5, 1939, Earhart and Noonan were officially declared dead. The US government concluded they had simply run out of fuel and crashed into the vast ocean. a somber crash and sink ending. The tragic conclusion, running out of gas far from land, remains the official story. It is the simplest answer and had been widely accepted by historians. As one history source puts it, according to the crash and sink theory, the Electra eventually ran out of gas and plunged into the ocean. No wreckage was ever recovered, and the Pacific's deep and unforgiving. Many experts believe the record stops there. Earhart's flight plan and radio transcripts match up with a slow spiral into the waves. 50 years later, amateur trackers even analyzed old radio sightings. Out of 120 post loss transmissions reported at that time, about 57 were judged credible, but none definitively saved her. In this view, Earhart did not vanish into thin air. She simply landed in water. Even so, that explanation leaves a haunting void. Earhart's empty seat left countless questions. Many points in her flights were uncertain. Were the compass and radio truly working? Could the plane have drifted off course by several hundred miles? These gaps allowed other possibilities to flourish. For decades, sleuths have pored over every clue, a cluish artifact that might say she landed somewhere rather than merely sinking. The allure of the mystery only grew with time. Journalist Vic Gillespie noted that because the evidence was never recovered, Earhart's tale has all the elements of a real mystery, turning her story into a legend that people still want to solve. And so, from the official crash at sea, more sensational theories sprang up. Perhaps the most popular alternative theory centers on Gardner Island, today called Nikomaroro, hundreds of miles south of Howland. Tigha, an aviation history group, had championed this scenario. The idea is that Earhart and Noonan missed Howland and instead landed on the uninhabited atoll of Nikomaroro. There, they survived as castaways for a time before perishing. What evidence supports this? It begins with historical oddities. In 1939 and later, British colonial officers on Nikomaroro reported finding human bones, a woman's shoe, and parts of an airplane wreck on the shoreline. These finds were largely forgotten, but from the 1980s onwards, Tigar began excavating the so-called Seventh Site on Nikomaroro, hunting for artifacts. They recovered numerous intriguing items. A small broken bottle that matches the jar of Dr. Berry's freckle ointment, a cosmetics product that Earhart used, a 1930s American women's compact, a zipper fragment, a bottle of body lotion, and even part of the bone-handled pocket knife Earhart carried on flights. They also found evidence of fire pits and animal bones that looked like the remains of meals prepared by Westerners. In other words, it appeared two people camped there. Some of the strongest claims came from a 2018 forensic study. Scientists reanalyzed the old bone fragments found in 1940 and argued that enough characteristics matched Earhart herself, for example, the size and build, to support the hypothesis. In other words, there was enough evidence to call Nikomaroro the final resting place of Earhart, though they could not test DNA because the bones were lost. Supporters point out that the radio bearing 157-337 that Earhart gave actually crosses Nikomaroro, and eyewitnesses like a local woman who saw airplane debris on a reef in 1939 seem to fit the story. However, critics remain unconvinced. None of the bones can be definitely matched to Earhart. The artifacts, while suggestive, could in theory have been bought by others or drifted ashore. Nikomaroro's reef also has shipwrecks, for example, the remains of the SS Norwich City nearby, which could account for some debris. So far, no piece of the Electra itself has been found. In short, the Nikomaroro theory tells a compelling story of castaways, but it is built on circumstantial clues. Tigar continues to organize expeditions there, hoping to find a smoking gun, perhaps part of the plane, to prove the tale once and for all. But as one former investigator puts it, solving the mystery might also diminish its allure. Earhart has turned into this legend. It will almost be a shame to solve it, he remarked with a laugh. A far more sensational theory claims Earhart never landed anywhere. she was captured. According to this line of thought, Earhart's plane went down in the Marshall Islands or elsewhere, and the Japanese military picked her up. Proponents note that in 1960s Marshallese oral histories, islanders described seeing two Westerners in Japanese custody, and decades later, they find this plausible. In 2017, retired FBI agent Sean Henry unveiled what he says is an Office of Naval Intelligence photograph from 1937 showing a dockside scene in Saipan. Two figures he believes are Earhart and Noonan standing beside a man who resembles her husband, George Whitman. If genuine, this would support claims she survived, was held prisoner in Saipan, and died there. But historians have serious doubts. All flight data places Earhart nowhere near Saipan or any Japanese held land on July 2, 1937. The Japanese government left no record of capturing an American aviatrix. No official dispatch or diary mentioned an Earhart in their camps. Many experts argue the photo evidence is highly contested and could easily be coincidental or misidentified. Moreover, by the time Saipan fell in 1944, there was no mention of finding such prisoners. In short, while the Japanese capture story gets headlines, it remains unproven. Most scholars consider it more myth than history. Other fringe ideas, from secret spy flights ordered by Roosevelt to a fake identity, have surfaced over the years, often inspired by fiction. For example, the 1943 movie Flight for Freedom. But none of these has held up to scrutiny. The consensus view still rests on the idea of a crash at sea. Without new evidence, conspiracy theorists will continue to swirl, each as intriguing as it is inconclusive. Regardless of which story one believes, Amelia Earhart's place in history is secure. She may have disappeared, but her legend has not. Over 80 years later, her name still draws crowds at museums and her example still fuels dreams. As Britannica notes, despite her tragic end, Earhart's accomplishment and her legacy still serve as an inspiration to thousands of budding young pilots. In many ways, the mystery itself has become part of that legacy. Degas' Rick Gillespie reflects that Earhart's story has become this legend, combining the facts of a pioneer with the romance of the unknown. He even jokes that solving the disappearance entirely might feel anticlimactic, like closing a beloved book. In the end, perhaps the most fitting tribute to Earhart is how she continues to make us look skyward. No matter what the ocean holds at the end of her flight, her spirit has already taken off into legend. Each new generation of pilots remembers her bravery. As one historian put it, her tale has all the elements of a real mystery, and she was an iconic American pioneer. The Pacific may still hold her a secret, but Amelia Earhart's name soars on, a reminder that some adventures never truly end.